Bloomberg Tech Asia is live with Shery in Tokyo and Annabelle Droulers in Hong Kong.
Welcome to the show. Today we focus on power, and I'm not talking about Annabelle influence, but actual electricity and energy demand, because we could see the power demand for AI data centers really double or even triple by 2035, which interestingly could actually mean more influence in the new age of AI.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, power demands are certainly at the point where we've had these ongoing discussions really about potentially crippling national energy grids, for instance. How do you balance those demands of what a nation needs for its general population versus as well what it needs to try and power that AI revolution? But here, I mean, of course, let's get to this chart.
Yeah, take a look at AI's power needs and what we're seeing right now, because even in the past 7 months, Bloomberg NEF's newest forecast in December, for example, saw a 36% jump in data center power demand from just 7 months ago. And Annabelle, I mean, you mentioned the strain on the power grid. Well, we're seeing the rising electricity bills and tech giants actually getting criticized. Also, environmental impact's an issue, right? Bloomberg News analysis last year are now finding that wholesale electricity costs as much as 267% more for a single month in areas that are very close to these very high demand data centers.
You know what I love, though, and this potentially ends up being the ace up China's sleeve in this, is that, yes, you've got rising electricity prices in many parts of the world. Actually, in China, you could see downward pressure on power prices this year because power demand is growing, and you saw that in that chart. But at the same time, generation capacity is actually expanding rather at a much faster clip. So there's lots of different threads they can pull on different types of supply: coal, renewables, nuclear as well. We saw Alibaba, for instance, teaming up with a nuclear leader just earlier this week. But certainly future industries as well to focus on hydrogen, fusion, modular reactors, that push as well. It's all going to come down to what we get in March. That is, of course, the new 5-year plan from the country that will be announced in Beijing. But certainly what steers the country toward its 2030 carbon emissions peak, but also its 2035 reduction targets as well. Let's get more on this now and bring in Bloomberg NEF head of US Power Market Research, Helen. Also joining us is Goldman Sachs co-head of APAC Natural Resource and Clean Energy Research, Nikhil Bhandari. So, Helen, I think we can start with you and just a big picture here. How acute do those energy demands become in 2026, and what is the outlook looking like as well?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So at BNEF, what we forecast, at least from a global power demand perspective, is that data center power consumption will reach roughly 1,600 terawatt hours by 2035. And then Asia Pacific in particular is going to have roughly 757 terawatt hours. China makes up the vast majority of that data center consumption with roughly 400 terawatt hours. And then other leading markets include India, Japan, and Korea. A lot of what drives BNEF's data center forecast comes down to the energy intensity of data center, or data consumption, as well as the kind of total data that is generated in any given market. And so that is why China and India end up being leading markets in Asia Pacific.
Nikhil, let's actually delve into China first, because as Helen just mentioned, is one of the biggest data center hubs. When are we expecting China to be able to achieve that self-sufficiency in energy, and what does the timeline look like for this build-out of data center and power demand?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me on the show. Look, when it comes to China, the data center demand is clearly rising, but on top of data center demand, there is already a strong, still underlying power demand is still growing at 4 to 5% per annum. So power demand will continue to grow also because of AI and data center. Now, what's interesting is that from a supply perspective, China is taking a very pragmatic approach here. They are focusing on increasing or ramping up supply for all the energy sources, whether it is renewable, batteries, nuclear, or whether it's they're still building up some more coal and gas plants. So The idea is to stay ahead of demand growth. We are estimating China already has nearly 300 gigawatt of power spare capacity right now, and we think even with rising power demand driven by AI and data center, the spare capacity could rise to 400 gigawatt by the end of this decade. So China supply, as Annabelle earlier mentioned as well, I think the supply is already running ahead of demand. So the concern is not on the generation side. The concern is more on the grid absorption side and the high voltage distribution lines to evacuate all that renewable power and reach the right places.
And so what's been done on that grid absorption side then, Nikhil? Because it's probably quite an enviable position for a country to be in based on what you see around the world.
Yeah, look, China, being China, will probably fix that grid bottleneck in the next few years. Initial bottleneck is the HVDC line, high voltage distribution line. If you look at the early talks of the 15th five-year plan, China's state grid is looking to expand the grid capex by nearly 40% in the 15th five-year plan. The initial part of that growth in the grid capex will be led by the high voltage distribution line to evacuate the power long distance, and the later part towards 28 to 2030, a lot of that capex will go in the smart grid at the receiving end. When the power is coming, it's still complex in nature. We should be able to receive it, synthesize it, and move it to the right places. So grid investments are accelerating, and that bottleneck should be resolved in the next 3 to 5 years. As it comes to places like India, of course, the grid is more young. It's, again, a one nation, one grid. But it is also starting to feel a bit of congestion on the grid. China hit 50% of their renewable power capacity mix as renewable and hydro 3 years ago. India is hitting that number now. And when you hit that number, and when your power demand is still growing 5 to 7%, it is not easy to evacuate, move it long distance, be able to receive it with a smart grid, and face no flawless, like it can't be a flawless system like that, right? So I think your grid absorption issues will be somewhat a challenge starting in India too, not just China.
So, Helen, Nikhil just mentioned all of these different energy sources for China, also India, that include, of course, renewables. But we know that Europe is very pro-renewable, but the United States more pro-fossil fuels, given the administration right now. How does that shape energy grid planning for data centers in the future?
Yeah, that's a really good question. At least I can give you a perspective from the United States, where we do see kind of massive data center growth. And at least in U.S. power markets, what we know is that the grid is the primary constraint for kind of continued growth of data center demand. What we are seeing in U.S. markets is that data centers are kind of navigating around the fact that there are constraints on the grid by either having co-location with existing infrastructure or having behind the meter generation as a way to kind of navigate less supply. In Asia Pacific, where supply is more abundant, what we see from data center development perspective, which mostly is traditional data centers, less so AI training-based data centers, is a focus mostly on traditional data center development key metrics, whether that is low operations expenditure, so markets with kind of low power cost as well as low capital costs for land. So any type of development metrics of cheap land and cheap power are really, really important. So it's why Malaysia and India are also kind of top 10 data center development markets that we see at Bloomberg NEF.
Helen, what's the relationship that we can also infer then between the availability of energy or energy supplies and also the development of AI technology? Do the constraints in certain places actually end up having a bearing on the build-out, or how does it work exactly?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So at BNEF, we split our forecast for data center demand, both by markets, so where power consumption will be located by location, but also by workloads. So we segment out our forecast based on the type of workloads data centers have. And that workload forecast is based off of the types of compute within a data center. And what we know is that a lot of the data centers that focus on AI training will be in the United States versus a lot of the data centers that focus on co-location or enterprise or cloud will be focused in Asia Pacific. So those type of data centers run around the clock. They are less flexible, and so we know that firm capacity is necessary. And so we know that although there's a lot of renewables coming online, particularly in China, we know there's hundreds of gigawatts of new renewables coming online. Data centers require kind of 24/7 around the clock type of supply to match its power demand.
Nikhil, to Helen's point about China, we're also seeing advances when it comes to nuclear technology, right? What sort of position will nuclear take, not only in China, but India and also around the world when it comes to powering AI?
No, absolutely. I think that's a very good point. As Helen mentioned as well, when it comes to data centers in Asia, you need round-the-clock power, also, if possible, affordable and cleaner. And nuclear tick mark on all the three boxes. So clearly, nuclear is top of mind. Not only tech companies in the West, but also in Asia are starting to think about more nuclear, especially in China. When it comes to China, nuclear is fairly cost competitive. Again, the capital costs are higher, but the running cost is lower and it's more stable. So when you look on a levelized cost basis, the full life cycle of the project basis, nuclear could be cheaper than coal, and it could still be cheaper than renewable solar plus battery, the round-the-clock solar option. So clearly nuclear is top of mind. When we look at globally, over 60 reactors are being built till 2030. Half of them are being built in China. The main challenge is still the time to market. It still takes 6 to 12 years. Even in China, where regulations could move faster, scale can be larger, time to market is still a challenge. So it can't be still the only solution. And that is why what I mentioned about China's pragmatic approach, given the abundance of renewables and batteries, making them round the clock, which is also competitive on China's power cost curve, will also be another solution. So again, nuclear will matter, but also round-the-clock renewables will matter as it comes to China. As it comes to the rest of the Asian markets like India, there is not enough gas. Nuclear is still starting up, but the process is still going to take some time. So alongside renewable, with the surging power demand from 5% CAGR to long-term 7% CAGR, we think we need to rebalance it with coal as well.
Nikhil Bhandari of Goldman Sachs, really good to have you with us. Also, Helen Ko, Bloomberg NEF. And coming up next, we speak with one of the world's hyperscalers about how it plans to keep pace with AI-driven energy demand. Our interview with Microsoft is next. This is Bloomberg.
In order for a new industry to emerge, you need energy. And so I think it's safe to say that we wish we had more energy in the United States. Europe wish it had more energy. I think the world all wish we had more energy.
Tech companies are turning to new power sources to keep data centers running. Microsoft has sites in 34 countries and faces soaring electricity demand as AI grows. I asked their energy VP, Bobby Hollis, how the company plans to meet it.
We do believe that there's going to be significant efficiency that's going to come from deploying AI and figuring out how we can actually make sure that we're using every single megawatt and megawatt hour in the most efficient way possible.
And that is so important at a time when there's more criticism about rising electricity costs, right? I believe your president, Brad Smith, was referencing this in a blog post recently, talking about paying for the cost of building and using the electric grid infrastructure required by your data centers. How do you manage to really understand that demand needed as opposed to other households and business consumption as well?
Right. So that's really where we view the partnership with utilities and grid managers as extremely important to making sure we're doing everything the right way. when you look at a new technology, whether it's cloud 10 years ago or 20 years ago or artificial intelligence now, you do see that there's a need to kind of have the wide range of options and then narrow those as you get better precision around what the expectations look like. We do see opportunities to collaborate with utilities around the world to figure out where those places are, where there might be surplus generation, additional infrastructure that can serve us, and take advantage of that.
You have talked about partnerships with utilities, but you're also having partnerships with big financial companies. We understand BlackRock back in 2024. Tell us a little bit more about the alliances that you're forming and also how you're working with the government as well.
That's a really great question, because what you have to look at from an energy perspective is the fact that it is a very broad ecosystem. So utilities and grid operators are very important, but bringing the capital investment that's necessary to make sure that we're able to partner and make those kind of investments with the right stakeholders and the right partners, which in some cases may be utilities, but in many of the more competitive grid environments, we actually do have the opportunity to partner with investment organizations that can see the opportunity from capital deployment for the energy sector, especially in this AI, this particular AI environment.
What about your relationship with the government? And I'm not just talking about the Trump administration, but also, of course, in the other countries that you operate.
So we do find that governments and policymakers are important stakeholders when you're really introducing them to the concept of AI and some of the uncertainties that we're encountering. How do we find the opportunity to really leverage efficiency, make sure that we're going to the right places, and really make sure that we're telling the right story so that they can understand that things like affordability and making sure that we pay our own way are critical, not just to how we do business, but how we look at deployment across the board.
I believe Bill Gates was talking about either fission or fusion being the cheapest way to make electricity in the long run. Are you concerned about some of the pushback, though, in local communities?
Well, that's where we do find that partnering with the right communities and making sure that the communities are welcoming of the particular technology that they're looking at. So not every place may want to see nuclear at their particular location. We want to be sure that when we go to a community like we did with the Crane nuclear transaction in Pennsylvania, that that's a community that not only is supportive, but really wants to see the jobs, the growth, the energy reliability that comes from bringing those resources back to the grids that they are actually supporting.
Bobby, when we're looking at the energy needs for Microsoft coming in the next few years, we know that data centers are already in 34 countries or so, with the United States still being at the epicenter. Is that sort of the idea of how Microsoft will grow?
We are very fortunate at Microsoft to be a trusted global partner, not just a US-focused entity, but really going to where our customers need us to be. Asia Pacific is a very important growth region for us. We're always looking for opportunities. We've been at the forefront of finding ways for places like Malaysia. We've long been in Singapore, almost 20 years now in the Singapore region, with the key opportunities that it presents for us. And we are throughout all of the APAC region, as well as Europe. We're going into places in Africa that make sense because our customers really are driving us there. So from the standpoint of how we look at the deployment and the fractions, if you will, or the division of the different infrastructure, it really goes to where the customer growth is. So there's definitely an opportunity to see that growth differently in the future than it has been possibly in the past.
Is the infrastructure model when it comes to energy demand across Asia at all different from other parts of the world?
I think in Asia, of course, we have a lot more countries that we're definitely looking at how we can invest there and how we can actually find a way to put infrastructure in those locations that don't just serve that particular location, but also serve some of the neighboring regions. So some of the commercial cloud developments were very focused on serving that particular nation or that particular region. As we look at a much larger and growing portfolio and some of the energy needs and even carbon-free energy needs, we see opportunities to look at other places and really finding ways that the grid can expand and have those countries collaborate and cooperate, especially when you have smaller regions like Singapore or Hong Kong, for instance, and then larger regions that are nearby that might have stronger resources, whether it's solar, whether it's the opportunity to import from those other locations. those are the kinds of relationships and expansions of grids that we see as tremendous opportunities to enable not just us, but any kind of industrial growth to really go to the places that make sense and present opportunities for the entire region and not just a specific city or a specific location.
What do you see as the biggest opportunity and perhaps also a critical test when it comes to Asia, when it comes to powering artificial intelligence?
It really is getting those grid interconnections so you have the opportunity to do the things that allow for really the expansion of that industrial energy base. So that's necessarily something that we have been focused on for a while. Sometimes it was focused on looking at how you could add carbon-free energy specifically to a particular grid. That's been something that we looked at in Singapore. We did a great investment opportunity from the standpoint of partnering with a local renewable energy supplier to use solar rooftops in Singapore. That's some of the only resource because it is a smaller geography. So then you look at some of the opportunities that they have to really reach out to their neighbors and partner with their neighbors, as we're seeing already happen. And those types of opportunities and discussions are ways that we do see to add carbon-free energy, add capacity, and to do it in a responsible way and to do it in a way that's actually the most efficient and hopefully the most affordable for all the customers in that region.
That was the Microsoft Vice President of Energy, Bobby Hollis there. We'll have more ahead. This is Bloomberg Tech Asia. Well, Shery, I think if we've really learned anything over the past 30 minutes is that the global AI race is heating up, but also energy could end up being the determinant factor in this, essentially, because we're really seeing the impact of it. I mean, there's some very interesting research we're discussing with BNEF at the top of the hour. Yes, you're seeing that huge expansion in data center power demand. Where you're particularly seeing it is in the US market. And actually, if you take a look at data centers today, they've got a 3.5% share of overall energy demand in the US. That's going to go to 8.5% or 8.6% just in the next few years.
Yeah, this race for AI dominance really supercharging the power demand everywhere, right? So that is actually leading to all of these investors not only leaning into fossil fuels, but even clean energy. Bloomberg Intelligence now saying that solar in the U.S. could actually account for about 10%, despite the fact that we do have a more pro-fossil fuel administration. So this is really a development that we'll continue to watch, as it will really depend about powering the next generation of artificial intelligence. That's it for this episode of Bloomberg Tech Asia. Stay tuned next month for more. This is Bloomberg.